I stood in the kitchen, staring at the clock ticking loudly on the wall. The hands moved forward, but time felt suspended, like I was stuck in a moment that I couldn't quite grasp. I tried to focus on the aroma of the baked chicken filling the air, but my mind was elsewhere, caught in a whirlwind of doubt and betrayal. It was Tuesday. My gut twisted at the thought of what might be happening behind our closed doors. Mom, are you okay? My son, Jake, stood at the kitchen entrance, a concerned look etched on his face. I forced a smile, but the tension in my chest wouldn't let me breathe properly. I was more than concerned. I was terrified. Of course, honey, I lied, turning back to the stove, stirring the sauce as if it held the answers I desperately sought. Just a bit tired. Do you want me to help with dinner? He asked, stepping closer. No, it's fine, really. I waved him off, my heart racing. I had to keep it together. Little did Jake know, I was wrestling with a storm of emotions, all triggered by my growing suspicion of my husband, Mark, and our daughter-in-law, Lauren. Weeks of unease had led me to a decision I never thought I'd make. I'd installed a hidden camera in the living room, a small, inconspicuous device nestled between the books on the shelf. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but I needed the truth. I needed to see whether my fears had any substance. I still remember the first time I witnessed Lauren entering our apartment on a Tuesday evening. It was a gray afternoon. The clouds loomed heavy outside. I had been organizing some old photo albums when I decided to check the live feed from the camera. My heart raced as I saw her walk in, her hair cascading down her shoulders, a confident smile on her face. What struck me was the envelope she placed on our coffee table before slipping away with a quick glance at her watch. Mom, what's wrong? Jake's voice pulled me back to reality, but I was already lost in my thoughts again. Nothing, Jake, just thinking, I replied, my throat dry as I recalled the sight of that envelope disappearing into the dim light of our home. It was my cue to act. I spent the next few evenings spying on the recordings, creating a timeline, and piecing together the puzzle that was my life. Each Tuesday, without fail, Lauren came over, leaving that same mysterious envelope behind. My heart pounded with each passing week. I felt like I was playing detective in a story that had no ending. Mom, you're quiet tonight, Jake said one evening, noticing my distant demeanor while he helped me chop vegetables. Do you want to talk about anything? I hesitated, the weight of my secret tugging at me. It's just, you know how busy life gets, right? Sometimes I just need to sort my thoughts. Jake shrugged, returning to his tasks, unaware that I was spiraling into a chaos of emotions. As days turned into weeks, my feeling of powerlessness began to shift. I had taken control. With every detail I uncovered, every piece of evidence I collected, I felt myself emerging from the shadows of doubt. It was thrilling, albeit terrifying, to feel that I was finally getting to the bottom of my family's secret. It was a Friday when I finally made the decision to confront Mark. I had gathered enough evidence, enough proof that the woman I had welcomed into my family was possibly betraying me. As I stood in front of him, my heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. Mark, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. He turned from his phone. About what? The casual tone made my blood boil. About your little friend, Lauren. I watched his face pale slightly. The way his jaw clenched told me everything I needed to know. The night of the wedding dinner felt surreal, the kind of surreal you only see in movies where everything seems fine on the surface, yet there's an undercurrent of chaos simmering just below. I was surrounded by friends and family, laughter floating through the air like confetti, but I could hardly join in. My stomach twisted in knots, as if my body was trying to tell me that things weren't right. Mark was beaming, standing proudly next to our son, Jake, who was dressed in a little suit that made him look even more like a miniature version of his father. I forced myself to smile, hoping that maybe this night would help me forget the swirling doubts in my mind. Yet, even as I played the part of the happy mother, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. And then it happened. Just as we were about to sit down for dinner, Jake's voice rang out loud and clear across the table. You owe her an apology. The room fell silent, and for a moment it felt like the air had been sucked out of the space. All eyes turned to him, to me, and then to Mark. I froze, my fork poised midair, My gaze locked onto my son. "What did you say?" Mark stuttered, his face flushing a deep crimson. He looked toward me for help, but I was too stunned to respond. I felt a mix of confusion and anger bubbling up inside me. What had he meant? Apology? For what? Jake didn't back down. You know, for lying to Mom, for lying to all of us. His innocence somehow made the accusation sting even more. I wanted to pull him aside, to tell him to stop, but my heart raced as I realized the implications of what he had just said. "Jake, please, that's not appropriate," I finally managed to whisper, pressing my hand against my chest, hoping to calm my own racing heart. The room was still, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Mark snapped back. "What are you talking about?" "Mom told me. She saw the videos, you and Lauren." Jake's voice was steady, but his words sent shockwaves through the room. I felt a mix of pride and fear for my son. Had I truly thrown him into this mess without meaning to? "What videos?" Mark's eyes darted between Jake and me, filled with wild confusion and rage. "Mom's been worried. She thought something was wrong, and she installed a camera. You know, just to check," Jake replied with a nonchalance that made me want to scream. "Enough," Mark roared, his voice echoing off the walls. "You don't know what you're talking about." The facade began to fracture, the bravado he had held up so well starting to slip away. I stood, feeling the warmth of the kitchen light on my skin, a stark contrast to the cold silence of the room. "You're right, Jake. I do deserve an explanation, Mark. What were you doing with Lauren? Why was she sending you those envelopes?" My voice was stronger than I felt, a surprising edge to the words. The room shifted slightly, as if the very air around us recognized the tension. Mark opened his mouth, ready to deny it all, but I raised my hand to stop him. "I've got the evidence. I know what's been happening. You can't deny it any longer." His face twisted, a mix of anger and desperation. "You don't understand," he said, his voice lowering. "It's not what you think." "No?" The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could hold them back. "Then tell me what it is, Mark, because right now I feel like the fool who's been played. I need the truth." "Mom, maybe we should," Jake began, concern flashing in his eyes. "Let him speak, Jake," I said firmly, my resolve hardening like steel. "Fine, I'll tell you," Mark said finally, his tone deflated. "But just know, this was a mistake. It was just one time, and it wasn't real." I could feel the anger building inside of me, a rising tide that threatened to overflow. "One time? You expect me to believe that?" "That's what it was, I swear," he replied, desperation creeping into his voice. I shook my head, feeling the walls of our life together starting to crumble. "This conversation is far from over," I told him, standing taller than I ever had before. As I stood frozen, the tension in the room felt like a tightrope stretched too thin. Jake's voice cut through the uneasy silence, echoing off the walls. "You owe her an apology," he yelled again, his eyes darting between Mark and Lauren, who was now pale and trembling. I felt a mix of dread and relief wash over me. The truth was spilling out, and I was powerless to stop it. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his usual bravado crumbling under the weight of our son's accusation. "Jake, please, this isn't the place for this," he murmured, his voice low and defensive. "No, you can't just pretend nothing's happening, Dad. Mom deserves the truth," Jake insisted, his voice rising with every word. When Jake had first confronted Mark, I could only stand there, my heart racing and my hands clammy. Part of me wanted to step in, to diffuse the situation, but another part, the part that had spent sleepless nights grappling with betrayal, felt the fight within me spark to life. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Jake, I began, but fell silent as I saw the flicker of disbelief on Mark's face. "I saw the camera, okay?" Mark finally blurted out, his voice cracking. "But it's not what you think. Lauren is just—" "Just what?" I interrupted, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions churning inside me. "You think I'm going to buy that? I've seen the way you look at her. The way she looks at you, it's sickening." Lauren glanced at Mark, her expression shifting from shock to annoyance. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting, Olivia, she snapped, her voice dripping with feigned confidence. Overreacting? I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Don't pretend we don't all know what's been going on. I've seen the envelopes you leave behind, Lauren. Why don't you explain those? Mark's head dropped, the realization of his choices crashing over him like a wave. Olivia, I made a mistake. But what? I interjected. It's too late for excuses. I trusted you, Mark. I thought we were a team. Suddenly, Jake's voice broke through the chaos again. Mom, you need to stand your ground. You're stronger than this. His words ignited a fire inside me, and I squared my shoulders, looking at both of them with a newfound resolve. Jake's right. I'm done being the victim in this story. While you two were scheming, I've been gathering the pieces, and I won't back down anymore. The finality of my words settled in the air. Mark's eyes widened, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind, calculating his next move. What do you mean, gathering pieces? I took a deep breath, recalling the nights I spent poring over footage, documenting scenarios, piecing together the puzzle they'd created. I've seen everything. I know what you've done, and you can't manipulate me anymore. Mark hesitated, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Olivia, we can fix this. Just give me a chance. Fix what? I snapped, feeling the control I'd been seeking finally wrap around me like a warm blanket. You've broken something that can't just be glued back together. My trust is gone, Mark. And in that moment, everything crystallized for me. I was not just a victim. I was reclaiming my power. The memories of sleepless nights and questions danced before my eyes, but now they felt like stepping stones to my freedom. I'm changing the locks, I declared, my voice calm but unyielding. The room fell silent, each of us absorbing the weight of my words. Jake stepped forward, putting an arm around me, anchoring me in this moment. I'm proud of you, Mom. You deserve so much more. My heart swelled with gratitude. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll never let anyone treat us like this again. As the evening wore on and the wedding dinner resumed in awkward silence, I felt a sense of peace begin to wash over me. The confrontation had been challenging, but it was a necessary step. As the echoes of the confrontation lingered in the air, I could hardly believe the avalanche of emotions crashing down on me. Uncertainty, betrayal, and a fierce determination pulled at my heart. The wedding dinner had turned into a battlefield, and I stood at the crossroads of my life, staring into the abyss of what had been and what could be. Mark's face had paled when Jake confronted him. I could still see the flicker of guilt in his eyes, mingled with anger. He had tried to maintain his composure, but it was clear those walls were crumbling. The truth was out, and I could finally breathe, even if the air felt heavy with the remnants of deception. Olivia, this isn't what it looks like, Mark stammered, attempting to regain control of the conversation. Then what is it? I shot back, my voice steady, reclaiming the power I thought I'd lost. The thrill of standing my ground surged through me. You need to explain it to me, and not with your typical excuses. Lauren watched, her expression a mask of disbelief, but I could see the guilt tucked behind her facade. I turned my gaze to her, feeling a rush of anger mixed with sadness. The woman I had welcomed into my family had betrayed me in the most profound way. Do you really think you can just walk into my life and act like you belong? I asked, my voice calm yet firm. You're not just confusing my son, you're shattering the trust we had. Jake stepped forward, a protective presence beside me. You owe her an apology, he shouted at Mark, his voice ringing with authority. The room fell silent, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I placed a hand on Jake's arm, a subtle signal for him to hold back. This was my battle now. An apology? Mark echoed, disbelief dripping from his voice. You think an apology can fix this? No, but it's a start, I replied, my heart racing. Not just for Olivia, but for yourself. Admit what you've done. Why should I have to apologize to you? He shifted his weight, struggling to hold my gaze. Because I deserve it, Mark, I said softly, yet firmly. I deserve to feel valued, not just as your wife, but as a person. Silence enveloped us, and I could feel the other wedding guests holding their breaths. This wasn't the anniversary party I had envisioned, but it was a reckoning, and I would release the weight that had been suffocating me for too long. Finally, Mark sighed, resignation washing over him. "I'm sorry," he muttered, barely loud enough for me to hear. "Sorry isn't enough," I said, shaking my head. "You've taken a lot from me, but you won't take my dignity." As I looked around the room, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. I acknowledged the pain, the betrayal, but I also recognized that this moment was my awakening. The fear of losing everything no longer paralyzed me. Instead, it propelled me forward. I was ready to reclaim my life. In the days that followed, I took deliberate steps. The first decision was to change the locks on the apartment. It felt monumental, each turn of the key symbolizing my regained control. It wasn't just about securing the door, it was about securing my peace. I asked Jake to be there with me when I called the locksmith, and he stood by my side, offering quiet support. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Jake's question was tinged with concern, but I could see the pride in his eyes. "Yes," I answered with conviction, watching the locksmith work. "It's time for a fresh start, and that starts with feeling safe in my own home." Once the locks changed, I felt a wave of empowerment wash over me. With each click of the new key, I whispered affirmations of strength to myself. I could do this. I could build a new life, one that didn't include the shadows of Mark and Lauren. I began to gather evidence of their deceit, documenting everything I found and every interaction I had with both of them. As the echoes of Jake's confrontation faded, the dining room felt suspended in time. The shock on Mark's face had morphed into a mix of embarrassment and anger, but I stood firm, my heart racing with both fear and newfound empowerment. I took a deep breath, gathering the courage I didn't know I had. This was it, my moment to reshape my world. "Jake, thank you for what you did," I said, my voice steady but low. He looked at me, his eyes wide with concern, and nodded. "I'm just so tired of seeing him lie, to you, to all of us." "I know," I replied, feeling the weight of his words settle in my chest. "But we can't let him control the narrative any longer. I won't let him." Mark shifted uneasily, but I wasn't going to let him intimidate me. I took another step forward. "You don't get to apologize and think it's enough. You've betrayed us, Mark. You've betrayed our family." "I made a mistake, Olivia," Mark sighed, his voice filled with regret. But even that fell flat against the backdrop of Jake's righteous anger and my own simmering fury. "A mistake?" I echoed, incredulous. "You think lying to me and bringing another woman into our lives is just a mistake? It's not just a mistake, it's a choice you made repeatedly." "I thought," he began, but I cut him off, my heart pounding in my chest. "You thought what, Mark? That I would just accept your infidelity and everything would go back to normal? You've underestimated me for the last time." The silence stretched, heavy and charged with tension. I could see Mark grappling with his thoughts, his mind racing as he tried to grasp the reality of what was happening. This was the moment when the power shifted. I was no longer the passive participant in our marriage. I was taking control of my life. "I'm changing the locks tomorrow," I stated firmly, my voice echoing in the silence that followed. Jake's eyes widened in surprise, but there was a flicker of pride there too. "Mom, are you sure?" "Yes," I affirmed, shutting down the doubt that tried to creep in. "I'm done living in a place where I feel unsafe and betrayed. This house will be mine, and I will protect what's left of my family." Mark opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand. "No more words, Mark. Just go. We'll figure this out in court." With a defeated sigh, he turned and walked away, the sound of his footsteps fading as he left the room. I glanced at Jake, who looked both relieved and unsure. "What now?" he asked. "Now we breathe," I replied, feeling a tiny spark of hope, "and we move forward." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and legal terminology that felt foreign to me. I met with my attorney, who was a fierce woman named Linda. She had a no-nonsense approach that I appreciated. "Olivia, you're stronger than you think," she said during our first meeting. Mark may believe he holds the cards, but you have the truth on your side. And that, my dear, is powerful. Between my lawyer's guidance and Jake's unwavering support, I began to uncover more evidence of Mark's deception. Each piece of the puzzle fell into place, reinforcing my resolve. I was no longer just surviving, I was actively fighting back. On the day of the hearing, a sense of calm washed over me as I walked into the courtroom. I could feel the tension in the air, but I was ready. I glanced at Jake, who was sitting in the front row, his eyes filled with encouragement. "Let's do this," I whispered as I took my seat. When it was my turn to speak, I recounted the moments that had brought me here, the betrayal, the lies, the pain. "I don't want to vilify Mark," I started, but my voice gained strength as I continued. "I want to reclaim my life and my worth." The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. I could feel every heartbeat echoing in my ears as I sat at the plaintiff's table. My hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but rather from the adrenaline coursing through me. I had spent countless sleepless nights preparing for this moment, and now it was finally here. I was ready to confront the reality of my life, with the truth as my weapon. I glanced at Jake, who sat beside me, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You're going to be amazing," he whispered, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. His faith in me was like a light piercing through the fog of uncertainty that had shrouded my life for far too long. As the judge entered, I straightened in my chair, forcing my mind to focus. The courtroom was a strange mix of solemnity and anticipation. The air crackled with the promise of a reckoning. Mark was seated across from me, his demeanor flippant, as if this entire ordeal were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. My chest tightened. How could he be so casual when everything was at stake? When it was time for my attorney to present our case, I took a deep breath. As he laid out the evidence, videos from the hidden camera, the envelope Lauren had left behind that I'd found crumpled on the floor, the text messages revealing their collusion, my heart raced. Each piece of evidence felt like a nail being driven into the coffin of my past life. "Your Honor," my attorney began, "the behavior of the defendant and his accomplice has not only betrayed the defendant, but trust of the plaintiff, but has also led to emotional duress and financial instability." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I felt a shift within myself. This was no longer just about survival. This was a fight for my dignity. I couldn't help but glance at Mark as my attorney spoke. His arrogance seemed to wane with each admission. A flicker of fear crossed his face, and I reveled in it. He had done this to me. He deserved to feel the weight of his actions. "Objection," Mark's lawyer suddenly interrupted, a smirk on his face as he leaned forward. "This is all circumstantial evidence. Just because she found a few messages and some footage does not prove—" "Not just a few messages," my attorney shot back, his voice steady and firm. "These messages detail arrangements made between my client's husband and this woman, Lauren, to meet weekly while concealing it from the plaintiff. This is direct proof of infidelity and betrayal." The judge nodded, cutting off further protest. "I will allow the evidence. Let's see what you have." My heart raced as we watched the video footage play on the screen. There was Mark, laughing with Lauren in our apartment, my apartment. He reached out, brushing her hair back from her face with a tenderness that cut deep into my heart. I shuddered. No amount of anger could shield me from the pain of seeing him with her. I felt Jake's hand squeeze mine harder, silently urging me to hold on. We were almost there. The end was within reach. After the footage played, I stood to give my statement. My voice shook, but I took a deep breath and steadied myself. I thought I knew the man I married. I thought our life together was built on trust. But in reality, he shattered that trust without a second thought. I've lost not just a partner, but my sense of self. I'm here today to reclaim that. I deserve honesty. I deserve respect. As I looked directly at Mark, I could see the facade slipping away. The cocky demeanor melted into something vulnerable. "Olivia, please," he started, but I cut him off. "No more excuses, Mark. You owe me more than that. You owe me an apology." My voice rang out, resolute. I had to give myself that acknowledgement, even if I knew he'd never truly understand the depth of my pain. The judge interjected, bringing order back to the courtroom. "Let's stay focused on the evidence at hand." The tension was palpable, but I felt lighter. The courtroom was quieter than I expected, the air thick with anticipation. I sat at the plaintiff's table in a room that felt both foreign and crucial. My heart raced, but a sense of purpose washed over me. I was here to reclaim my story, and this time I would be heard. Mark entered, his demeanor as confident as ever. He wore that same arrogant smirk, but today it felt knockoff, a facade just waiting to crumble. He may have thought he could brush off what he did, but I knew better. Today, the truth would unravel in front of everyone who mattered. Your Honor, my attorney began, her voice steady but passionate, we are here today to address the emotional and financial manipulation my client has suffered at the hands of her husband, Mark Smith. She gestured toward me with a warm smile, and I felt a little more grounded. Mark scoffed, leaning back in his chair, but I didn't let his attitude shake me. I had evidence, proof. The envelopes, the times Lauren visited, the text messages I had discovered. Each piece stacked against him like bricks in a wall of accountability. Mr. Smith, my attorney continued, can you explain why you felt the need to engage in a relationship outside your marriage? Wasn't it enough to have a family, a loving wife who stood by your side? Olivia was never enough, Mark sneered, and my heart dropped, the words slicing through the room. She was always too busy, too focused on her career. I needed someone who could give me what I wanted. You mean someone to deceive? My attorney shot back, her voice firm. Is that what you needed? Because Lauren was never going to fill the void you created in your own life. I sat there, poised and calm, absorbing the moment. Mark, do you even realize how self-centered that sounds? I called out, my voice seemed surprisingly steady. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed Jake too. You were a father in name only. Don't bring our son into this, he bellowed, suddenly standing. The judge banged the gavel, demanding order. Mr. Smith, please control your outbursts, she warned. I could feel the energy shifting in the room, people sitting up straighter, their gazes landing on me more intently. I prepared to present my evidence. I took a deep breath and slid the first batch of documents across the table. These are copies of the messages between you and Lauren, Mark. You arranged secret meetings, made promises, and lied about where you were. And you expected me to sit around waiting for you to notice? Mark shot back. But the weight of my evidence bore down on him. The stunned silence that followed spoke volumes. I had taken control of the narrative. My attorney asserted, Mark, you have been living a lie. You were never fighting for your marriage. You were fighting for your convenience. She picked up a photograph of me and Jake, beaming at a family event. This is what you destroyed. Not just your marriage, but the trust and love we had built as a family. As the hearing progressed, I began to share my feelings. I loved this man, I said, my voice a mix of pain and strength. I stood by him through thick and thin, only to learn he was betraying me with someone I considered family. Lauren was like a daughter to me. I never imagined they would do this. A murmur of sympathy rippled through those present. The judge's expression seemed to soften, and I took that as a sign of goodwill. Mark's confidence began to fade as I continued. I worked hard to build this life, and now I refuse to let him walk away without facing the consequences. I want accountability for him, for myself, and for Jake. Your Honor, Mark muttered, attempting to regain control. This is all just a scheme to ruin me. But I knew better. No, Mark, it's about taking back my power, and maybe you could learn a thing or two from this. As the judge took a moment to consider the evidence, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This was more than just a court case. It was the closing chapter of a painful story and the beginning of a new one. After what felt like an eternity, the judge declared her decision. I find in favor of the plaintiff. Mr. Smith, you are ordered to provide compensation for emotional distress and support for your son. A wave of relief washed over me.